Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Katie Pavlich in for Judge Jeanine Pirro. Tonight, hypocrisy lives on Martha's Vineyard, where at this very moment, former President Barack Obama is holding a massive bash to celebrate his 60th birthday. Earlier this week, the Obamas pledged to scale back the extravaganza to include only friends and family. That move was allegedly in response to concerns over the Delta coronavirus variant. So what does scaled back really look like in the eyes of the 44th President of the United States? Well, massive tents have taken over his sprawling $12 million Martha's Vineyard estate, and forget about social distancing, hundreds of maskless attendees have descended onto the island. Among those so-called close friends and family reportedly include Jay-Z, Beyonce, Stephen Colbert, and many other left-wing celebrities. So while you are being asked to, and told, actually, to mask up despite your vaccination status, and while you have been told to cancel birthday celebrations for at least 2 years, the Obamas and their liberal pals are playing by different rules. Meanwhile, all of this comes on the very same week that Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that New York City will soon require vaccine passports in order to enter bars, restaurants, gyms, and other privately owned establishments. Take a look.
So today I announce a new approach, which we're calling the Key to NYC Pass. This is a miraculous place, literally full of wonders. And if you're vaccinated, all that's going to open up to you. You'll have the key. You can open the door. But if you're unvaccinated, unfortunately, you will not be able to participate in many things.
Well, some states are taking steps to prevent vaccine mandates from being implemented, and that includes Arizona. Joining me now with more on that battle is Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich, as well as the founder of the Center for American Liberty, Harmeet Dillon. Thank you both for being here. Attorney General, I want to start with you. We have this system of federalism, so what can states do to push back on mandates from the federal government, or maybe to make sure that businesses have some rights inside of these liberal cities?
Well, Katie, thank you for having me on. And I think that as most Americans, and as in Arizona, I think we're concerned because we're battling two pandemics right now. One was created in a Chinese lab, and the other one is being created in a DC swamp. And the Democrats are using this pandemic as an opportunity to concentrate power in Washington, D.C., which is completely inconsistent with what the framers envisioned. I think one of the reasons why the 1619 Project is pushing this revision of history, because they don't want Americans to know that the framers of our Constitution understood that the states were supposed to be a check on the federal government. And any time you get concentration of power in one entity, it becomes oppressive, and our liberties are undermined, our freedoms are undermined. And so the Biden administration has been very inconsistent when it comes to the pandemic, but they've been very consistent in trying to undermine federalism and concentrate power in D.C., and whether that's tax and spend policy, whether it's nationalizing our elections, and now whether it's trying to dictate to the states what they can and can't do, it completely undermines federalism. I'm going to do everything I can to keep fighting back against the Biden administration.
So, Harmeet, you're one of the most important, I think, civil rights attorneys in the country. Take a listen to what Joe Rogan had to say about de Blasio's passport system, and we'll get your take on the other side.
You can't work anymore unless you do what I say. That's essentially what a vaccine passport is.
Right.
You can't do what you want to do unless you do what I want you to do. I mean, Don Lemon was talking about that openly on CNN.
Yeah.
Don't have a vaccine? Can't go to the supermarket. Don't have a vaccine? Can't go to work.
So, Harmeet, there seems to be two arguments here, that private businesses can do what they want and require vaccination of their employees, but this is a different situation in the sense that the mayor of New York is mandating that businesses have this system in place or people can't go to work.
Well, both of these things are hugely problematic, Katie. On the private front, we have all kinds of laws that protect citizens against discrimination by employers and by places of business. These laws are being ignored with respect to this new vaccine mandate, which we've never had before for adults in this country, which violates religious liberties and the rights of people of their conscience, their protection over their own body, as well as medical issues. Now, when the government mandates it, it's 100 times worse. We have a significant racial disparity, just to make one point about this vaccine situation. Only about 33 or 35% of African Americans in New York City are vaccinated, and they are being shut out from businesses, from travel, from being able to work out. This is unconstitutional, and the government doesn't have the right, doesn't have the police power for the most part to do this kind of thing. There isn't even a rational basis for it. We now know in recent days that vaccination status is not necessarily a proxy for either safety or for non-communicability. And so I think this is a civil rights crisis of our time in the United States, and we need citizens to stand up. I mean, you may make the choice to be vaccinated. Most Americans are doing that. But the fact that people are being forced into it is tyranny. It is contrary to the very founding of our Constitution in this country. And if we let it pass for this issue, I guarantee the governments, federal, state, and local, are going to be imposing further mandates on all kinds of issues, and we cannot tolerate this, Katie.
Well, speaking of mandates and tyranny, of course, we saw this week President Joe Biden expanding this attack on private property rights through the CDC by expanding this eviction moratorium that the Supreme Court said was unconstitutional. So, Attorney General, I mean, we've seen the federal government overstep in things like shutting down churches, shutting down businesses. We've seen state governments do that as well. And now we're seeing the federal government through the CDC telling landlords in places like Arizona that they are not allowed to collect rent.
You know, Katie, it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Suggestions. And property rights are so fundamental to our Constitution because, once again, the framers understood the relationship between protecting private property and freedom, especially political freedom. And we have, as Madison said, rights in our property and property in our rights. And so we know the Biden administration, even the president himself, has talked about the fact that they think what they're doing is constitutionally suspect, but they want to get out as much money as possible, because I would submit to you this is all part of a plan to undermine the laboratories of democracy, that is the 50 states, concentrate power in Washington, D.C., and get more and more people dependent on the federal government. And that's why it's incumbent on all of us, especially the AGs, especially state officials, to stand up and push back against the Biden administration, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or independent, because once you cede that power to the federal government, you're never getting it back. As Ronald Reagan used to talk about, there is no more permanent thing than a temporary government program. And once you transfer that power, we're never getting it back as Americans.
Yeah, Harmeet, this is turning into, like you said, a civil rights crisis. This is not just about vaccination, unvaccination. This is about being forced by the federal government to do X, Y, or Z. And it seems like the end is never. And when it comes to this attack on private property, if they can do this on private property rights, what's to say that the CDC can't go off after issues like gun control for the sake of public health, or issues like climate change for the sake of public health? Right now, they're doing it under the guise of COVID. But where does that end? And what is the situation with the president openly saying, I know this may not pass constitutional muster, after already been told by the Supreme Court it's not constitutional, and yet here we are with them pushing forward on it?
Oh, this is a huge problem. For one thing, the CDC is not a legislature. The CDC is not the government. The CDC doesn't have the right to make up crimes, which they're doing in this recent legislation. To be very clear, the federal government has almost no police power over our daily lives. That's in the states, as the Attorney General stated, and it's at the local level. So this is completely farcical, and this is the type of thing that actually is an impeachable offense, in my opinion, to ignore a co-equal branch of government, which has clearly stated that this is not constitutional, and to just go ahead and do it anyway. And if we let this stand, it will be the first of many. And so, yes, we don't want the federal government telling us who can go to school under what circumstances, property rights, all kinds of issues that are local to the states, criminal sanctions for different types of crimes, the death penalty, all of this. So this has been a longstanding plan, I think, of Democrats. You see Democrat Congress people who know that they can't make these types of changes in their own state, so they're just camping out and making scenes in the Capitol and trying to get things done by fiat at the federal level, with no consideration of all the families who own property and who are struggling themselves to make ends meet, who are being broken by these mandates. So, like I said, it may not affect you. You may not be a landlord. You may not care. But this is the beginning of a very dangerous precedent. And we are going to see, I think, if this continues, we're going to see some significant unrest. Hundreds or thousands of people have contacted me about these vaccine mandates. They are absolutely desperate to be able to control their own bodies and their own lives. And the government's taking that away from them. We can't let this proceed.
Absolutely. As you said, it's a battle, and certainly we will continue to follow it. Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich and Harmeet Dillon, thank you both so much for your expertise and insight. We appreciate it. Well, another major story we are following tonight is all of the mixed messaging on mandates amid this Delta COVID surge. And this week, the mixed messaging took a bizarre turn. Take a listen to what the NIH director said on Tuesday.
The recommendations are for kids under 12 that they avoid being in places where they might get infected, which means recommendations of mask wearing in schools, and that at home, parents of unvaccinated kids should be thoughtful about this, and the recommendation is to wear masks there as well.
Well, not surprisingly, has since walked back those comments, tweeting that he needed to clarify the message that he garbled and that there was no need to mask at home. But the mixed messaging and confusion on every level is pretty terrifying and frustrating. Here with reaction to that and much more, author of COVID, The Politics of Fear and the Power of Science, Fox News medical analyst, Dr. Mark Siegel joins me now. Dr. Siegel, just want you to react to what the NIH director said and the cleanup he tried to do and where that leads people just trying to get good information so they can do the best they can to mitigate the situation.
Well, I think it's good that he walked it back, because I think that people at home that where parents have been vaccinated, you know, you can't be masking all the time. So I'm glad that that happened. But your idea about the mixed messaging, you know what that does? That seeds distrust and non-compliance with the vaccine, which is what we need right now. We need people to look at the vaccine from a public health point of view, Katie, and to say, I'm not just protecting myself, I'm protecting my family, my community. That's a patriotic thing to do. It doesn't need to be forced on you, though, by the government, who acts as though they know better than you do. That's the problem. And the more mixed messaging, when you talked about former President Obama having a huge party, maskless party, people gathering. By the way, you can spread this outdoors if you huddle together in a tent somewhere on President Obama's property. So I think you need clean messaging. And masking confuses the messaging because the vaccine works a lot better at decreasing the spread of this variant and at protecting you from severe illness and those around you from this variant. The masking, I think really we're looking at, for masks to really work against the variant properly, it's probably a mask like a KN95 or an N95. It's less proven, it's certainly not proven that lesser masks like cloth masks do what we think they're doing. So the problem with the government is they keep with the stick all the time. Mask, mandate, those words scare people, and that's why you just had a discussion about civil liberties. Don't use the word mandate to cover something you don't have the science on.
So, Dr. Siegel, you're telling us tonight that the cloth masks aren't effective against the most recent variant we have of this disease, and yet we have teachers' unions demanding that kids be masked up at school all day, which of course has a number of devastating effects on children's development, both socially and in other areas of their health. And so why are we recommending that people wear cloth masks or paper masks that you get at the grocery store, especially considering Dr. Anthony Fauci a year ago in February 2020 wrote that they don't stop the virus from spreading because the particles are too small? You had one of President Biden's former COVID advisors, Dr. Michael Osterholm, who is an epidemiologist, saying what you just said, that cloth masks don't work. So why are we subjecting the children and quite frankly all the adults to wearing these coverings if they don't actually work?
Well, first of all, I don't know if they don't actually work. They haven't been studied is what I'm saying, and I want them to be studied against the Delta variant. We know, and this is the most important thing, that in 3 studies in North Carolina, in Utah, and in Nebraska, that there was less than 1% spread within schools. We know, Katie, that if you throw kids out of schools, they spread it a lot more in the community than they're ever going to do in a school. So we need not to give the teachers union an excuse to say that schools need to close again with all of that damage that you just talked about, the socialization damage. I'm saying that I am suspicious that a cloth mask, which is ill-fitting, when we just had a study out of CDC that you actually need 2 masks, I'm suspicious that a 3-year-old might not be able to properly mask up with what I would want them to use, which is a stronger mask like a KN95. Right. So that's why I'm using words like recommend here. Recommend is the best word. I think masks help. But I'm suspicious that cloth masks don't do what people are saying they are going to do, like it's some kind of religion that you have to follow.
So, Dr. Siegel, just quickly a follow-up on that. If adults are vaccinated or have natural immunity, why do children need to wear masks at all?
Well, I think if adults are vaccinated within a circle, okay, and they are vaccinated or have natural immunity plus perhaps 1 shot, I don't think that kids really do have to be masked in a household like that. I think that was an erroneous statement. I don't think that that's correct. I think if you're in a small group or you're in a household and the kids are too young to be vaccinated, and by the way, they are much less likely to spread COVID-19, and you are vaccinated, you're pretty much protected against, except for the mildest possible case. So we have to target those who need to get vaccinated, which is those who haven't had it yet. One of the reasons we're not getting people to go for this is because of all of this mixed messaging. You feel like they're coming down on you, and that makes people resist and rebel.
Well, in a lot of places, they are coming down on people with these mandates. Dr. Mark Siegel, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Coming up, do not allow the Biden administration to distract you. COVID is not the only threat to this country. The crisis exists at our southern border, and it's only getting worse. Shocking new developments are straight. Well, the Biden administration should take their own advice. The city of McAllen, Texas, says that the federal government has released more than 7,000 COVID positive migrants there since mid-February, over 1,500 in just the last week alone. And their mayor had something to say about it, and he wasn't blaming the governor.
If you want to place blame, let's do it. But let's place it not on our municipality, not on our county judge, not even on our governor. But the people responsible for this is, I can tell you right now, it's in Washington.
The emergency shelter put up to house these migrants was expanded yesterday and is now holding over 850 people, despite being built for 250. But it's not just a problem there. New photos out of a migrant detention center in Donna, Texas, show just how crowded their facilities are also becoming. Joining us now to react, Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez and Sheriff of Cochise County, Arizona, Mark Daniels. Thank you both so much for joining me tonight. So, Congressman, that statement from the press secretary about Texas and the role that the governor is allegedly playing is really amazing, considering the Biden administration is doing nothing to stop COVID positive illegal immigrants from coming into the country. And then the Justice Department has now sued the state of Texas to stop them from stopping the transport of COVID positive illegal immigrants.
Yeah, Katie, things on the border are as bad as they've ever been, and they're only getting worse by the day. The Biden leadership has failed. His policies, his border policies have failed and have rained hell on the Texas frontier, right? So months ago, throughout this process, many people have asked me, hey, what can we do? You can remain vocal and you can stay engaged. Thankfully, Fox has done that. Back in April, Senator Cornyn, Senator Sinema, Congressman Cuellar, and myself put together a piece of legislation, Bipartisan Border Solutions Act. One of the things that it called for was to add 300 ICE agents to the equation. After months, the administration has finally done that. There's going to be 300 ICE agents that are headed to RGV and Del Rio sector. That's just a start. Right now, over 40% of Border Patrol agents are in these processing centers. We got to get them back out in the field. But this solely lies on Joe Biden's failed border policies.
Yeah, Sheriff, the cartels are loving this distraction in the Rio Grande Valley of thousands of people flooding into the country and pulling Border Patrol agents off the front line. In Texas tonight, we saw outside of El Paso, a Border Patrol agent was fired on 20 shots by the Mexican side of the border. In Arizona, where you are, cartel activity has picked up substantially since January 20th, 2021. So talk about that aspect of it. There's the immigration issue, but then there's also the drug and fentanyl problem and this criminal element that is being emboldened in places like Arizona.
Well, Katie, thanks for having me. And with Congressman Gonzalez, I want to go say something real quick. What he stated about the bill him and Senator Sinema and others pushed, National Sheriff Association supported them. We thank them for what they're doing on that end. When it comes to the southwest border, Katie, it is a fracture, a complete failed policy. It's a fracture. The stats, the political stats, I call them when it comes to how they're perceived. In Washington, D.C., they're being avoided. On the border, they're real to us. Last month alone, 220,000 legal entry, 37,000 getaways. You combine that totally since President Biden's been president, that's over 300,000 getaways. 100,000 come out of my region of the state of Arizona. We are very concerned. Drugs are up 100 to 300, 400%. The war on drugs, we got to get it back. It's coming because 250 people are dying every day of drug overdoses. Katie, we're in a bad situation here on the border.
Yeah, I want to pull up some numbers on fentanyl on the screen because the federal government's job is to protect Americans from foreign threats. And we're seeing now that as of July 16th, 8,500 pounds of fentanyl have been seized by Customs and Border Protection. So, Congressman, this is such a dynamic issue. But the bottom line is that the Biden administration is enabling cartel activity, enabling drugs to pour into the country, and aiding and abetting illegal immigration into the country. And it doesn't seem like it's going to stop, and despite the bipartisanship that you've found in Congress.
No, you're 100% right, Katie. You know, while Joe Biden is sleeping comfortably in Washington, D.C., determining if there is going to be a mask mandate, you know, in Texas, I've got families that are watching their game cameras to see, you know, if there's migrants that are on their property as they're putting their children to bed. I mean, people do not feel safe in their homes. In Uvalde, where I'll be on Tuesday with Representative Fortenberry, you've got migrants jumping off the train, record numbers. And look, it's dangerous to the migrants as well. I mean, they're dying horrible deaths. You've seen it throughout. So I urge the Biden administration, please get engaged for the sake of everyone involved. The chaos that you've caused along the border is unacceptable.
It is unacceptable indeed, with lots of consequences. Congressman Gonzalez and Sheriff Daniels, thank you so much. Up next, can Governor Cuomo survive? We are live with legal analysis as calls for his resignation over a massive sexual misconduct scandal pile up. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett.
Upgrades. 18 Republicans voted in favor of advancing the bill, but final passage isn't guaranteed just yet. If it clears the Senate, it still faces a very rocky road ahead in the House. Meanwhile, embattled New York Governor Andrew Cuomo could face misdemeanor charges. That's if Albany investigators substantiate a criminal complaint filed this week accusing him of groping an aide. Cuomo is facing mounting calls to step down after an independent investigation concluded he sexually harassed 11 women. Cuomo denies those allegations.
Welcome back to Justice. Well, tonight, against all odds, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo remains in office. This despite the release of a scathing report from the state attorney general that outlines serious violations of both state and federal crimes. Take a look.
The investigators found that Governor Cuomo's actions and those of the executive chamber violated multiple state and federal laws, as well as the executive chamber's own written policies. I am inspired by all the brave women who came forward. But more importantly, I believe them.
Following this announcement, President Joe Biden and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer both called for Cuomo to immediately resign. And yet somehow the nightmare in New York rages on and the governor continues to survive countless major scandals. So how does he do it? With the help of his pals in the mainstream media, including his brother. Take a look.
I called Mom. She said I was her favorite. Can't believe you're lying to my audience. You've blown the credibility of the entire interview. You've always been the meatball of the family. Do you think that you are an attractive person now because you're single and ready to mingle? Some say I shouldn't come on this show because you harass me. Too much fierce accountability? Provoke me. Can't take it? Is it true that this was the swab that the nurse was actually using on you and disappeared, so that in scale, this was the actual swab that was being used? Was it this? Or was it this? Tell people the truth.
And joining me now with more is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, where are we with this situation?
Well, the clips you just played of Andrew and Chris Cuomo together in this Abbott Costello comedy routine is really disgraceful. It's nauseating, and shameful for a journalist to be doing that. Think about what was happening. Thousands and thousands of people were dying, and they're yucking it up on national television. And Chris Cuomo spent months propping up his arrogant brother, not challenging him about things like his role and cover-up in nursing home deaths. The list goes on and on. And now we learn from this Attorney General report that it was Chris Cuomo at CNN who was secretly advising his brother to portray the victims as liars, to blame them, to say he's a victim of the cancel culture. And CNN and Jeff Zucker have taken no action against Chris Cuomo. My goodness, he violated just about every journalistic ethical rule in the books. But listen, Katie, the charges here could be quite serious. Against consent, lifting the blouse of a woman and fondling her breasts could be a variety of crimes, including forcible touching under New York law, obviously assault and battery, and also criminal harassment. So it'll be up to the Albany District Attorney to not only evaluate the evidence collected, which is apparently quite overwhelming and compelling by the Attorney General, but to do his own interview of this particular victim and decide whether Andrew Cuomo should be arrested, prosecuted, and jailed upon conviction.
So, Greg, I think it's really important to focus on the words from the Attorney General there, who specifically said that federal laws were violated in this office. Now, the Department of Justice already dropped the civil rights investigation into the nursing home scandal. They have the ability to launch a civil rights investigation into sexual harassment and misconduct in this situation. The president, Joe Biden, has called for his resignation. He hasn't gotten on board with impeachment. And why isn't President Joe Biden, who said in March that if the Governor Cuomo was found to have done these things, that he should not only resign, but that he should be prosecuted? And yet the Civil Rights Division doesn't seem to be anywhere close to the scandal.
Well, I agree that both federal and state laws, insofar as retaliation, sexual harassment, hostile workplace, have been violated. Action should be taken and civil lawsuits should be filed. But frankly, that's the least of Andrew Cuomo's worries. He has a criminal jeopardy that he's exposed to here by virtue of many of these complaints that have been given to the Attorney General and will surely now be given to the 5 district attorneys in 5 counties who have launched an investigation into whether Andrew Cuomo committed crimes.
Greg Jarrett, thank you.
My pleasure.
And be sure to check Greg's new series on Fox Nation, JFK, The Conspiracy Continues, this Monday on foxnation.com. And minutes away, a shocking statement by a member of the so-called squad that will leave you stunned. We may have found somebody even more reckless than AOC. Tonight, as we learn that squad member Cori Bush's campaign filings show she spent nearly $70,000 on private security. Now, that's right, for private security. This while she has been one of the loudest left-wing voices demanding at every opportunity that the police be defunded. Bush had this to say in defense of having armed guards for herself.
I'm going to make sure I have security because I know I have had attempts on my life and I have too much work to do. There are too many people that need help right now for me to allow that. So if I end up spending $200,000, if I spend $10 more on it, you know what? I get to be here to do the work. So suck it up, and defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police and put that money into social safety nets because we're trying to save lives.
Lots of hypocrisy going around. Fox Nation host Tommy Lahren here to talk about it, along with Turning Point USA President Charlie Kirk. So, Tommy, first of all, the irony is a lot of private security are former police officers, former members of the military who sign up to do those jobs. But also, it's a pretty reprehensible moral position to try to defund police protection for the communities that need it most against violent criminals, while you yourself take money to pay for private security.
Yeah, what she's really saying here is that her life is more important than that of her constituents. But mind you, it's not just the defund the police movement. We've also got leftists and squad members saying that they want to come after your gun rights. So not only do they want to defund your police departments, they want to really curtail your ability to protect and defend yourself, all while telling us to suck it up because she's more important than we are. And I'd also like to point something else out. You know, when she's got her private security detail, she's not calling social workers or mental health workers to protect her very important life. She has private security, armed guards, and police officers to do her protection on her behalf, once again showing the ever-present liberal privilege that we all have to deal with. And I hope that they play clips like this on a loop before midterms when the Democrats try to tell us that they're not for defunding the police. We hear it time and time again from the shining stars of their party. They absolutely do. And I hope that people remember it come time to vote.
Yeah, Charlie, for weeks, the White House has been trying to get away from this defund the police movement. They've even gaslighted Republicans and tried to push out the narrative that it was Republicans who defunded the police last year. And now here you have Cori Bush saying a lot in just 30 seconds about defunding the police. And so she kind of ruined weeks of work by the administration to take back that narrative.
Yeah, totally. I don't like to overemphasize on style, but I'm going to right now. Just her attitude and the way she said that was so telling of the modern Democrat Party. Unapologetic, leaning in, doubling down. Of course I deserve security. Don't you know who I am? I'm important, not like my constituents that, have to actually fend for their lives. And so she represents the BLM Incorporated movement while they're silent on the slaughter of black children in downtown Chicago. They could use private security. And so it's almost so absurd to hear a lunatic like Cori Bush say that. I don't use that word lightly, but it's deathly serious because these are people that are in charge of our government, Katie. Like, she actually has power. And she's out there saying basically, look, I get guards, you don't, because I'm a really important person. I hope there's going to be a political cost to this, but unfortunately, she'll probably just get reelected again. I agree with Tommy. It's a very good point. I want to thank Cori Bush for giving us a wonderful 30-second perfectly packaged attack ad heading into the midterm elections.
Tommy, and that's the thing, right? I mean, this is not just a one squad member who has this kind of ideology. This is pervasive, not just among Democrats in Washington, D.C., but also among city councils. We saw this happen in Minnesota. The city council voted to defund the police and then used a lot of taxpayer money for their own private security. And as Charlie said, there are real life and death consequences here, and we've seen a significant, horrific rise in violent crime as a result.
We certainly have seen a culture of lawlessness, and now there are some elected leaders that are trying to go back and refund their police departments. But it's not even just enough to refund your police departments to change certain policies, but you have to stop with the demoralization and the demonization of police officers as well. You have to give them the resources, but you also have to give them the respect that they deserve to go out and do that job so that recruitment can go up, so their retirement can go down. We can have great officers on the street protecting and defending our communities. They've got a whole lot of cleaning up to do if they want to get away from this narrative. And it's not all about midterms. I want the American people to be safe and secure no matter who they vote for. And I hope the Democrats realize that before more lives are lost, because it's really the human costs that we need to focus on here.
Charlie, final word to you.
Yeah, and again, I just want to say that her attitude and the way she leaned in on it is very telling. These are people that don't think they're going to have to give up political power anytime soon. They think they are the ruling class. They believe they're entrenched, they're untouchable. They do not believe in human equality as if we are all human beings. She believes in the divine right of kings. The way she spoke could be no different than a French king or the Sultan of Brunei. I have guards, you don't. Get used to it. Thank you very much for playing. This is a violation of the American project, and I can tell you, I hope it changes soon.
We will see as they try to refund their police departments. Tommy Lahren and Charlie Kirk, thanks so much. Still ahead, forget about kneeling and covering your face during the national anthem. We're going to highlight and congratulate the true American heroes who represented our country